you doing?
A little bit better now. What's going on? Were you
Doing
talking
well,
about me?
thank you. We were not talking about you. We can if you like, but that's good.
I mean, it's a decent topic of conversation. So
So it is noon. I want to thank all of you for being here. This is the Teaching and Learning Center's Professional Development Series. As you'll hear me say all the time, we do this at noon every Wednesday, and we have the opportunity for you to earn certificates for professional development. You become a TLC fellow. Noah's going to drop links to those kind of information in the chat if you want to hear more about that. But we always have awesome events, and today is absolutely no exception. Today we have Camilla Roberts from Honor and Integrity talking to us about how we can help our students rather than come down really hard on them and support their success through all of the kinds of things. And as one of the things that I love about this presentation is we're going to hear a lot about how to promote integrity and not as much maybe about how we need to punish lack of integrity. So it's going to be an amazing presentation. And Camilla, I'm not going to take any more time away from you because I know you have a lot to share with us, but thank you all for being here today, especially Camilla.
All right. Well, thanks, Don. Before I share my screen, I do want to let you know that, as many of you are aware, that once you share your screen, it's a little bit harder to follow a chat or what's going on. So I encourage you, if you have a question, just unmute yourself and speak up because it's, or maybe Noah and Don can kind of monitor if somebody raises their hand, but feel free to interrupt me. I mean, we're definitely a small enough group. I highly doubt 100 more people or so are going to join in the next 2 minutes or anything. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question at any point. And I'll try to kind of take some pauses too, in case you have any comments or thoughts or anything.
And Camilla, I'll monitor the chat. So if anyone does have a question that they can't ask out loud, that they want to ask, put it in there and I'll be happy to ask it for you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So for those of you who don't know me or have not met me, I'm Camilla Roberts. I serve as the director of the Honor and Integrity System, but I also did put on this first screen that I am currently the president. I'm actually finishing up kind of almost my second year and about to go into my third year for the International Center for Academic Integrity. And the reason I put that is because I'll be talking today about some of these fundamental values, and those are some things that come from that International Center for Academic Integrity. And the main goal for that center is to the idea of promoting integrity and creating a culture of integrity at an institution, because we do not, as the center, we don't say that one policy is the right policy, or a certain way to do something is the right thing at your institution, because we ask institutions to really look at their own culture and what would work for them in terms of holding students accountable. So we look more at that big picture of what does it mean to have a culture of integrity? What can we do? How can we build that? And looking at it, like Don said at the beginning, that not just about coming down on students. Yes, I'm going to talk about we need to hold our students accountable, but there's other things that we can do and other things we have to understand along the way. So today we're going to look at a few things. One, I'm going to talk about just an overview of academic integrity, especially if it's a new topic for you. Seeing who's in this listening today, for several of you've either heard me talk before or you've interacted with me. So some of you have a good sense of what academic integrity is, but probably a lot of you just have it through being a professor, being an instructor, you living as a student at some point in your career. So we'll talk about a little bit about what academic integrity, what I think it is. And then, like I said, we're going to go through some of those fundamental values and what do they mean for us as an institution, for you as a faculty member, for our students. And then just a little bit of background about myself. My master's degree is in counseling, and then I have a PhD in higher ed administration. So my background really is a lot of student development. I was in student affairs for many years before moving over to this academic affairs. And so I always like to bring in the idea of student development because it's very important for us to figure out where our students are. And there's some reasons why there might be some reasons why they act the way they do. That doesn't mean that what they do is always right, but at least gives some insight. I'm like, oh, okay, this is where they're at. I can't do a presentation nowadays without talking about contract cheating. And so we're going to highlight some of the concerning websites that we're seeing, and then really go into the tail end, the last 2 points of how and what can you do, especially in the classroom, to help create that culture of integrity, to change the dynamic in your classroom, and some hopefully some pretty practical examples for you. So to get us started, this again, the next few slides are coming from a lot of information from the International Center for Academic Integrity. But academic integrity is defined as a commitment, even in the face of adversity, to our 6 values of academic integrity, which are honesty, trust, fairness, respect, responsibility, and courage. The idea of academic integrity, we don't necessarily say it's just plagiarism or it's just unauthorized collaboration. It's really looking at those 6 values, and we'll go through them in just a second. But it's very important, and some of the things that I talk to the students when I'm able to speak to them, and is in almost all my student presentations, is the idea that a university is an institution of higher education, and we're really trying to help students learn. And learning stops when there's that academic integrity violation. And we want to make sure that the degrees that we're conferring upon people, that they're valid degrees, that we're not just that degree mill or the resume mill or diploma mills that you can find online. We're not just handing these out, but students have actually earned their degree. And so this is one of the things that, if some of you, most of y'all don't look old enough, sorry, I'm kind of generalizing, but most of you probably were not around back in the early 1990s. I wasn't even here when there was a large cheating scandal at K-State, which actually started the honor and integrity system. But it was because students were actually trying to go out and hand their resumes to future employers, that those employers said, well, all we're hearing about is that students are cheating. And so it really does affect the integrity of the degree when students take shortcuts. And so that is why, one of the main reasons why it's so important that we want to make sure that the integrity of the K-State degree is something that we can stand behind, and that our future employers of our students also know that they know what they're getting when they hire a K-State student. So let's look a little bit about these fundamental values individually. So the first one is honesty. And in the past, probably year, we revamped the document that the fundamental values is in, to really look and give more hard examples of what does this look like. And so we tried to really look at these fundamental values from both the institutional perspective, the faculty perspective, and then also the student perspective. And so I'm going to try to touch on those as we go through each of them. So, I mean, we all know what honesty is. We all hear, and we try to, I'm assuming you probably try to teach people, if you have kids, be honest, don't lie. And we tell them about, I mean, I have an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old. So the 7-year-old gives me a run for the money, 2nd grade right now. And so there's definitely times that, even this year, there were some things that she didn't quite tell me the truth about. And so we've had conversations about how does that affect future interactions with her, that we have to build that trust back up. But in terms of in the academic perspective and in the university, at an institutional level, those are the same things that we're expecting of our institution, of our administrators. We want to be told the truth. We want to know what's really going on. Nobody likes somebody just to kind of beat around the bush or not tell the full truth. But it's the same thing that we expect of our students, for them to be truthful. For those of you who do not know, my office is in 201 Holden, and so I actually share an office suite with the Office of Student Life. And so I hear a lot of the absence verification forms come about. And even just this morning, I heard a person talk about that somebody had falsified an obituary, had taken a screenshot and kind of changed the date just to be able to get out of a class. And so these are things that basic things that we expect of our students, to be honest, that somebody passes away, yes, we're going to be upfront and work with you, but you got to be honest and tell us exactly that it was right now, that it really was your grandmother, something like that. In terms of academic dishonesty, being honest about where you got the information from. But it's the same thing that you all have to do as faculty and instructors when you're writing for your own benefit, for your own journals, giving credit to where you're getting that information from. And we've seen a couple well-known folks just in the recent probably year, well, 6 months, have been called out for not giving credit. They're the president of the University of South Carolina gave the commencement address last May, didn't give credit, pretty much plagiarized his entire commencement address, and did step down. Of course, I'm a Clemson grad from undergrad and my master's. And so of course I was like, of course, it's University of South Carolina. They always have issues over there. It's very much similar between the KU and K-State competition. But the idea of honesty, we want to make sure that the information is factual. We keep our promises. So also being honest with your students, saying, listen, it's been a rough week. I'm going to take another week to grade your papers, or being upfront and telling them what's going on, not necessarily spilling everything about, but being honest with them and telling them and helping them understand your class and what your expectations are of them. So then we have trust. This is the idea that we're putting our trust in someone that when, and very similar to honesty, when they say they're actually going to do something, we trust that it actually occurs. Very much in our terms of the institutional, when our institution, our administration says that they're going to do something, that it actually follows through. That's where a lot of concerns often come about when we look at government administration. It's like, well, you said you were going to do this and now it's changed. That we want transparency. Transparency is the word that's always used, especially with administration. We want to, in search committees, we want transparency. But in terms of what you're doing as a faculty member, having those expectations, when you tell your students the expectations of what you're asking of them, that you follow through with that it doesn't completely change. You're not going to hold them to a different level of accountability if you said one thing. There is also a mutual trust that needs to be created in the classroom, that you trust that your students are going to do the work that you've asked them to do. Now, this is you having that trust on your students. That's why when an academic integrity violation does occur, that's why it stings a little bit. That's why you feel hurt, because you have put that trust, and that trust is now broken. And so that trust is acting with genuineness, and it really does tie into that idea of honesty. The third fundamental value is fairness. And this is in terms of rules and regulations and listening to everybody equitably. It's been very interesting in the past probably year or so. There's been a lot more discussion about the similarity of building a culture of integrity with the similarity of building a community that is strong with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so in terms of fairness, that we are treating people equitably, that we're having an open mind, that we can be very objective, and we're creating that community where people feel welcome. And we'll talk more about things that you can do to create that community, but you'll see that that community building to deter academic integrity violations is that same community building that you are doing for diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. Then respect. We all want to be respected. We want to create that respect. And it's very interesting that a lot of the data from academic integrity side says that when a student has a higher level of respect for a professor, they're less likely to violate the honor pledge, because they don't want to let you down. They don't want to disappoint you as a professor. And so in terms of respect, it's the idea that our individuals, if you have respect for your students will reciprocate that. And that respect can be built by the open communication, showing empathy, affirming and accepting differences. But then also recognizing that there are consequences. There's a fine line and understanding that respecting those boundaries. And so your students will pick up on that when you show them respect, and it will be reciprocated back to you. Then the next to last one is responsibility. We want our students to take responsibility for their actions. And that's some of the things when I talked with the students, when they have an alleged violation, I asked them, do you take responsibility for this? Do you not? And kind of talk with them about it. And so it definitely is a stepping point of when can they take responsibility, or are they blaming it on the professor? Unfortunately, sometimes they say, well, it's the professor's fault I did this. They didn't explain it right. But if they can really look internally and take responsibility, that's when they're able to grow and move forward to learn from that experience. But it's also important for our professors and instructors to take responsibility. And I'll talk again more at the tail end about things you can do. But one of the things I'm going to mention is that you have to be the teacher. And so taking some responsibility that if we're going to be holding students accountable, and you want to hold students accountable, we also have to teach them up to that point to say, I'm going to teach you how to do this, and then I'm going to hold you accountable. And then following through with that and holding those students accountable for that behavior. If you say you're going to do something, you actually do it. Then the final fundamental value is courage. And this one was actually added in the second edition of the fundamental values, because it was really looked at that to have and really act upon any of the previous 5 fundamental values, you had to have courage. And I think this is where it's important for our faculty and our instructors to have the courage to talk about academic integrity, to address any wrongdoing that they might see, to be willing to take some risks. I understand it's very difficult, and especially when you're thinking about teaching evaluations and what kind of backlash might you get if you hold students accountable for that. But that's where we're here to help you. I know that Don and I have had conversations a little bit about that. Even like, okay, I'm gonna, if you're talking to yourself that you're gonna give a student an XF or fail a student because of academic dishonesty, well, what happens if they put something on their teaching evaluation, or your teaching evaluation that is completely not related, but they're just mad because they were held accountable. But it's important that you still have the courage to do that, because we can help you through that process after the fact. But that courage allows you to have those other 5 fundamental values. So those are those 6 total fundamental values that are really, again, that bigger picture, because most of them they don't really relate 100% academic integrity. They're not all about academic integrity. It's about being that good person. It's about having that level of integrity that when student graduates from K-State, they're going to be a good citizen. And I think that's one of the things that we're trying to really place onto our students, that yes, you're going to have a degree, but we want to make sure that you can be able to represent yourself, represent your community, represent your family, represent K-State when you actually graduate. So if we look a little bit about some developments of our students, one of the first theories I just want to mention is Chickering and Risers. And this is one of the most famous theorists of college student development. And what Chickering and Risers say is that throughout the academic time period, of a traditional age college student, the students are actually moving through these 7 vectors. And the order that they're listed in on the screen are predominantly the order that they will actually follow through with. The developing competence, that is the idea of how can they actually do work, and understanding material. If you think about in terms of testing and in a classroom situation, developing competence is also looking at how much can they actually analyze information. So if we think back to our elementary or high school years, a lot of our tests were regurgitation. You simply memorize the information and you put it on paper. As you move forward in your academics, or if you think about your graduate work or your graduate students now, you don't have a lot of regurgitation of information. It's a lot of processing of information. What does this mean? And it's that competence of understanding that material that changes. And so that's why possibly when we're looking at freshman levels courses, yes, you can push them to try to analyze things, but a lot of times that might be one of the very first times they've actually had to take some of those type tests. And then as we get to in a little bit, we understand that stress that causes might lead them to be academically dishonest. So understanding where they are in terms of competence, not that you have to kind of make your test easier or make them in a certain way, but understanding that maybe I need to give them a little bit more support. If this is a freshman level class, you're not going to be asking them to be doing the same workload that you would for your graduate students. Our students are still managing emotions. This is why sometimes you might not always appreciate the way your students interact with you. They're trying to still figure that out. Maybe we're all still trying to figure that out. They are moving through autonomy to interdependence. Many of these students, when they first come to K-State or any college, that's the first time they've been without their parents. They now actually have to set their own alarm, get up for themselves. And so they're trying to figure that out. And so sometimes they don't have the parents saying that, or you need to do your homework. So they forget things. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's right and that you shouldn't hold students accountable for that, but you can learn that, oh, okay, yep, these students aren't 35-year-old students. They haven't gone through life changes like I have. They're still trying to figure things out. They are still developing mature interpersonal relationships. They're trying to, again, it goes with that emotions, of trying to figure out how to interact with one another. They're also still trying to figure out at what level do they see you as a professor. It's kind of like when I'm talked with my children when they were, especially when they were in preschool, and we'd see one of their preschool teachers or young elementary teachers out at Target. And it's a big shock. They're like, whoa, you're at Target. You actually you live in the real world too, because they think of just the teacher, they live at school, that's where they see them at. And so now you think about as your own experiences with your teachers, as you got older, as you matured, and as you went through college, you had a different experience with your professors even. Your freshman year in college, you probably just knew your professors a little bit. It wasn't probably something, you might not have known anything about their family, but then as you matured and you got to understand those relationships, then that interaction between you and your professor changed as well. And so our students are still trying to figure out what is that relationship with you and the faculty member as well. They're still trying to figure out who they are, their identity, their purpose. Their purpose is, that's why they might change majors several times. They're trying to figure out what do they want to be? Why are they here? And then the final thing that Chickering and Reiser says is that's when they're developing their integrity. Now, again, I said at the beginning that they go through these 7 vectors predominantly in order. They don't get to it even all during their freshman year. So that's why when we think about where are our students in terms of integrity, in terms of those 6 fundamental values, it takes them a little while. Yes, many of our students were raised by good parents who taught them values and morals, but when you throw in this new idea of coming to college and trying to figure things out on their own, that really shakes them up a lot. And so it really does make them try to, instead of having just their parental values kind of placed on them, they have to come up with their own. They really have to figure out and ask them, what do I think? Because I'm not being forced one way or the other because of my parents anymore, or because you're the other family members. So they're still trying to figure out and really trying to understand what kind of values they want in their own life. And when we think about moral development, Kohlberg and Gilligan both worked on the idea of moral development. Gilligan was actually Kohlberg's graduate student at one point, but they look at the different levels of what do students expect in terms of moral development. So this is predominantly a little bit earlier than college age, starts a little bit earlier than college age, but still, they're still working on understanding and making good moral decisions. And you see in that pre-conventional level for both Kohlberg and Gilligan, that first level is there's a lot of individualism, that they are really thinking that somebody else is in charge of them, and whatever else that other person does or says, they're the ones in charge. And they might say in terms of academic integrity, I'm not going to cheat because I'm going to get caught. They're scared of it. They're scared of that punishment. And they know about the honor and integrity system, things like that. That second level, that conventional, that's when they start thinking about other people. And so maybe in terms of academic integrity, they might say something to the regard of, I don't want to cheat because I respect my teacher and I don't want to hurt them. So they're still looking at those relationships. But that also is where they might choose to help a friend because they don't want to lose that friendship. They think that if a friend comes to them and asks them how to do an assignment, or can I see your assignment, I'm stuck on it, they might think, I know that cheating is bad. I know I shouldn't give them my assignment, but I really like this person. I want to maintain friendship. And so I'm going to choose friendship and that relationship over what I would consider the correct choice of saying, yes, listen, I can't help you, but you can go to your GTA, you can go to your teacher, you can go to tutoring, something like that. But our goal is to get them into that last level, that post-conventional. And that's when they're looking at it in a very universal perspective, that they're able to think about things and say, if somebody comes and asks them, can I borrow your assignment, or will you do my paper for me? They know, first of all, that it's wrong. So they can still think about that pre-conventional time period, that they have those rules and regulations. They can also think about what it means in a relationship, that I might lose a friend because I don't help them, but really they think about if that's what the friendship's based on, is that what I want to be? But they start really looking at it into the more community culture of understanding that, listen, if I help you, you're not learning the material, you will get a grade that you didn't earn. Then it turns into the idea of getting a degree that they didn't earn as well. So that is, again, some of our very upper level students normally. Yes, there are some that are freshmen, sophomore, juniors that have that higher level of moral development. But if we think about a lot of our students, you might hear what they're saying in some of those excuses and kind of see, okay, I see where you're at in terms of development. And again, it doesn't mean that what they're doing is always right, but at least it gives us perspective of where they're coming from. And then the last theory I want to talk about is Perry. This is the intellectual and ethical development. And if we think about our first year students, they're very dualistic in their approach. They are receiving knowledge. They go to a class, they want to be told what it is. Probably you've all received the emails from students before an exam saying, well, what's on the test? Can you tell me how many of this? They want to really be spoon-fed that information of here's what I want you to learn, and kind of almost regurgitate that information. As we move forward through until graduate students, our students really do make the change, and they start looking at subjective knowledge. So they're trying to figure out, okay, maybe the professor isn't always right. Maybe I'm trying to figure out how to do that. And that follows into procedural knowledge, where you're trying to you're able to give the individual the opportunity to figure things out themselves. And that leads right into the constructed knowledge. So that's really when that graduate student can be given a pretty broad topic and they can run with it for an assignment. I mean, it's basically their dissertation. They're able to construct the knowledge, they're able to gather things around them, but that dualistic individual definitely could not do that. But if you see that bottom arrow, when our students are under stress, our ethical and intellectual development for all of us goes back down. When we want to, very often when things are under stress, you'll hear people say, just tell me an answer. Just tell me what to do. I'm stressed. I don't want to make the decision. I don't want to do that. Just tell me what to do. And so even we do that and our own decision making when we're under stress. And so our students, when they're under stress, they often will revert back to not wanting to think for themselves, not wanting to kind of construct their own knowledge, but just want to be told the answer. And that's where it turns into academic dishonesty in some cases, because they aren't being told by you as the professor. And so they seek that knowledge out. So if we think about the past 18, 20 months, our students were under stress. And that's where students, a lot of them, especially in terms of our numbers, a lot of them chose to figure out some ways that they could be told the answer, that they could move back. It was less stress for them, and less kind of working in their mind and trying to create their own knowledge. They went back to that dualistic perspective of just tell me the answer. So why students cheat? There's a lot of different reasons. I've talked about a couple of them already. But when students feel a pressure to succeed, a lot of times it could lead to academic dishonesty. That means if they have to maintain a certain GPA for a scholarship, maybe for parents, if the parents have a certain level of expectation that they have to have, if they have to have a certain grade to be able to compete in athletics. There's lots of different pressures, and sometimes it's with social student organizations have a certain GPA that students have to maintain. So there's that pressure to succeed. They have to get a certain grade. A lot of times these things are grade related. Fairness, if others are doing it, it was pretty amazing in the past year. I heard that several times from our students. They said, I felt like I had to do this and make the choice of looking online or cheating in some way because they wanted to be at the same level as everybody else, what they claimed everybody else. If they saw other people doing it, they figured that they need to do it as well, because grades weren't being inflated by or curved by the instructor, because there were some that were doing well. Some students might cheat when they think the material is trivial or irrelevant. And so we'll talk more about that point in a second. They might cheat when the course is too hard. They just don't understand it, or if they think faculty expectations are unreasonable. It doesn't necessarily mean they're unreasonable. It could be they just don't understand that information. But when they don't have the background knowledge to help them, then they try to take those shortcuts. Some students cheat because they have poor time management. They have not planned ahead. They don't look at the syllabus. And then some just cheat because they might not even know what constitutes cheating. They don't quite understand what you meant, maybe, or there's a lot of gray area in terms of especially unauthorized collaboration. I was just talking with a student yesterday who now does admit to, I see how I went beyond the line, but students were able to work on an assignment together, but the students turned in identical assignments, where this assignment should have easily had some discrepancies between the students, even though they were answering the same question. And so he realized now that, oh yeah, I see how that was unauthorized, why that was kind of beyond the gray area of collaboration. So sometimes sometimes students do it unintentionally in that regard, or they just haven't paid attention and they don't know the rules and regulations. But then we also have some reasons of why students don't cheat. The peer environment, just like anything in terms of peer pressure, there's a lot of information out there with bullying and just in terms of especially in our K-12 curriculums, about creating that peer culture and that peer environment. If cheating is not the norm, then students aren't going to do it because they want to be a part of the culture. They don't want to be the outsider. And so if cheating's the culture, like I said earlier, that's why some students cheat. If they thought everybody else cheated, they did it too. But if the students think that, hey, listen, people don't cheat, then I'm not going to as well. There are students that do have a high level of self-respect. They've come in with morals and values and they truly believe them. And really, it's not just their parents instilling it in them, but they have really taken it to heart and they are their own values. And so they're not going to do it because they do have that higher level of understanding that this is going to be bad for the community if I do something. Some students don't cheat because there are the consequences. They're afraid of failing the class. They're afraid of getting that lower degree or grade. They're afraid of suspension or expulsion. If the chances are being caught are high, students are less likely to cheat. So students will tell us that if they know that that professor or that instructor is one that often reports, then they are less likely to try anything in that class because they don't want to be caught. And then very similar, if they have that self-respect, if they're committed to learning, they're more likely to not cheat. So it fell on a good day that I'm talking to you today, because today is actually what's considered the International Day of Action Against Contract Cheating. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a couple slides. But this day of action is sponsored by the International Center for Academic Integrity. And there are about 180 institutions worldwide who have said they're doing something in terms of spreading the word about contract cheating and trying to get the word out there that this is a concern worldwide. So it's not just in the US, it is everywhere. And so today I listed out several of the most common sites that I am seeing that I have professors send me information from or have concerns about, that things are posted either online, so their questions are posted and answered, or students are posting information, or they're getting support from them. Chegg is one of the most well-known probably sites. If you're not familiar with Chegg, it is not just for the STEM fields. It is really expanded, that students pay a pretty minimal fee, a nominal fee to become a member. They're then able to post the question, whatever question it might be, and then that is answered by what they consider a subject matter expert. The leaders of Chegg, and I've had some pretty lengthy conversations with some of their vice presidents and even their legal counsel, because Chegg is saying that they are helping the student. They're a tutoring service where pretty much anybody in academic integrity, we know that in most cases, the student is just copying that information. Bartleby is a very similar site. It's not quite as well known, but is actually owned by Barnes and Noble. So unfortunately, there are some institutions that have Barnes and Noble as their university bookstore. And part of that, if they buy their books through that university bookstore, they get a free subscription to Bartleby. So there's a lot of institutions that are trying to stop that that little add-on, and there have been like I know that I believe it's Emory University in Georgia. Their academic integrity folks at their institution really did a big push saying if we're going to keep Barnes and Noble as our university bookstore, they may not have anything about Bartleby published or sent out to the students. Course Hero is another pretty common and famous one. This is one, and I have a note on this slide that I do have a Chegg account, and so I can provide a PDF of any answers that you might have. But I'm looking into getting a Course Hero account as well as an institution, so that you don't have to pay that out of your pocket. Study.com. Slater has actually now joined with Quizlet. There's Study Soup. There's a variety of essay mills, and the picture you see here is actually an Instagram post that I have contacted quite a few in the past couple months, quite a few K-State Instagram users, like either student groups or even some of our departments that were following this Instagram account. And basically this is they're saying a Kansas State essay service, and it does say they're not affiliated with K-State, but they are basically wanting students to come to them, and then they will write papers for K-State students. And so I have asked, when I see things that are especially directed at K-State, that if it's a K-State affiliated program or office, that I ask them to unfollow it, because I don't want our students to see I'll just say if I was following this account as my office, I don't want the student to think, oh, well, if the honor and integrity system's following it, then it must be a reliable place to get information. So those things are out
Camilla,
there.
if I can just pop in with a question, like how is this legal?
Well, in the United States, there are very few legal ramifications for it. There are a few states that are starting to put some laws against it, but unfortunately, because they will have it somewhere in the very, very small print that you should not submit this as your own. It will be considered plagiarism. So
okay, because I'd heard you said with the Chegg, we say they're a tutoring service. Well, this is pretty blatant. We will write your papers for you. So it just okay. That small print thing makes a little bit of sense to me, but okay,
yeah.
I'm more sitting here
right.
in shock than anything else.
Yeah, it's not right, but that's that small print somewhere on their website, or they'll say, you should not actually put this and submit this as your own, but we know that why else would you buy the paper if you weren't going to submit it? There's also domyhomework123.com. I mean, there's tons of these sites where students can have pay for an entire homework to be done, or even an entire online course to be done. I did look up just a quick search on Course Hero and just look up K-State biology. I don't know if we have any biology people in the group today, but this is from biology. I don't think the number is 100% correct, 19, because I think that probably wouldn't be 100% correct, but somebody's just taking even a screenshot. And so Course Hero and Chegg, they actually have the image transcription, so that students don't even have to type out the question. It'll automatically adjust to it. And then down below, which I just took a short screenshot here, would be the answer and an explanation. So Course Hero sets it up in a little bit different way. So I encourage you, if you want to go onto Course Hero, you can look up Kansas State, you can search K-State, and then search your department to see is anything on there. And like I said, I'm working on getting an account with Course Hero so I can be able to see those answers. And Course Hero will do some takedown information. It's a little bit more in depth than what Chegg does, but I know I have colleagues from across the US who work with Course Hero definitely more than I do, probably to the extent that I work with Chegg at this point. So there is movement, though, to kind of give a little good point, is there is movement against contract cheating. Right now, there is a suit against Chegg by Pearson Publication. So many of you might use Pearson or have used Pearson before. They're a well-known publisher. Pearson just recently halted any interaction with Chegg. So previously, Pearson, as well as Wiley and also OpenStax, had relations with Chegg, and so they actually did provide the questions. And so if you go onto Chegg, you can see a lot of Wiley's books were on there, and I know Wiley's been pushing them to take things down when they've ended all relationships. So Pearson now has a suit against Chegg, and it is a copyright suit, but it really still deals with the idea of academic integrity, because I think this is important for you as instructors to know. If maybe you even ask, if you have somebody coming to you and saying, hey, I've got a new textbook, will you review it, or will you maybe use it for your class? To ask them, do you have a partnership with Chegg, with Course Hero, with things like that? Because you need to know whether all that material is going to be automatically online or not. Because previously with Wiley and Pearson, if you bought the book and you used them, pretty much every answer for those books was easily accessible on Chegg. And so I encourage you to talk to your publishers and figure out what kind of relationships do they have, so you know what availability do your students have from the very beginning if you choose that textbook. The Chegg in particular, their stock prices drastically increased throughout the pandemic, but however, in the past 6 months, they have gone down just over 31%. So that's a benefit. They're getting a little pushback, and so they're not being quite as prominent in the academic integrity field. In Australia, starting in September, and this is one of the things that Australia is a leader in the idea of academic integrity, especially contract cheating. And they are able to have an entire national law that bans advertising and selling of cheating services. So for Don, is what you said, what your question was like, if this was in Australia, it's completely against the law. And so they have actually, just this past week, 2 weeks, they've been able to ban 2 different essay mill sites from the internet. And so they have completely taken it off. If you're in an Australian internet, you may no longer get access to those sites, which is pretty amazing that they're able to do that. Then another movement that goes directly along with the International Day of Action. I wanted to share this because y'all are definitely able to play it as well in your own classes. And we're not going to play it all today, but you can go to this Jeopardy Labs, and it just, I think it's neat even if you just go through the questions to help you understand them, but if you want to do it for your class as well. And I'm thinking about maybe doing a presentation that kind of covers this, and then you can do the game afterwards. But so this is all about contract cheating. And so I'll do a couple of them. So the basics, of course, this is founded in 1992 to combat academic dishonesty in higher ed and cultivate the cultures of academic integrity in academic communities. And so what is the International Center for Academic Integrity? We'll go to how it works, outsourcing, ghostwriting, and paper mills. So what are the different types, different terms contract cheating is known by? Strategies to reduce when facing stress or mental health crisis issues connected to class or even beyond them. This is the campus service students can go to. What is University Counseling Center? So I think it's important that these are there, that it's not all about the idea of academic integrity. The strategies are helping the student as the big picture. We'll do one more. The first individual a student should typically consult at a university when struggling with his or her class. What is the course instructor? So having that relationship built is important to having the student gain the respect that you have, and then also the respect that that you're expecting of the student. So I will, I did see in the chat, I'll put the link directly in there. But yeah, I encourage you to go through that. All right, so we've got a little bit of time still, about 12 minutes or so, to finalize what can you do. So we do have to make that shift of not looking at academic integrity of just the policing, but making that shift to how are we going to mold our students? How are we going to get them from those young freshmen that are coming in that might be naive about the world, about life, about making decisions, to they're looking at it in a broader perspective and seeing that every decision they make is affecting their community. And so it is important to understand that we know where our students are, that they are still developing. And I can't say it enough that doesn't, if they are at the kind of the lower level of development, that doesn't mean that they are off to be and free to do whatever they want. We still hold them accountable, but it just gives us perspective and helps us understand and maybe ways that we can help our students and meet them where they're at. Understanding the idea of challenge and support. Challenge and support is another major theory and idea of education, but also of development, that you want to push a student to achieve the next step, but you also have to be there to support them. And so it's important that if you are teaching that lower level class and you want them to be able to think critically, well, you can have them do that. You don't have to just do regurgitation of answers. You can have them think critically, but you also need to work with them and help them learn how to think critically, and then hold and be there to support them as they do it. And then the idea of being the teacher. If we are going to hold our students accountable to something, we need to make sure they know what they're being held accountable for, and we teach them and be that role model. I have some professors that I've worked with that say they're going to be very strict on APA style of citation. So my first response is that you need to make sure you're spending some time in your classroom and you're not just assuming that students know APA style of citation, but take the time to explain it to them. Take the time to explain why is it important to you? Why do we do this? So it's not just a random rule, but you're really, again, being that teacher and making sure that they understand the material and not just throwing it all at them. So in the short little write-up that I had to prepare that came through on the K-State today, one of the things was that you normally have to do things more than just put the honor pledge in your syllabus. And so I've got the last 3 slides or so of just, these are very practical things that you can do in your classroom. Is one, look at the assessment styles, that idea of being very dualistic in your thinking versus multiplicity. So is it going to be that critical thinking? And how do you support the student if you want something that you want the student to really be constructing their own knowledge? How do you support that lower level student to be able to get there? Maybe you look at assessments in terms of teams or individuals. Sometimes individuals are good. I mean, you need that. You need to know that the individual is actually doing their work. But sometimes teams can get you the same result. You know that they're learning to communicate with individuals. They're able to work together with somebody else. And you can still gain a lot of results, especially if you do some sort of assessment from the teams as part of the grade, so that they have to be, they're held accountable by their other team members of, yeah, this person didn't show up at all, or this person did this part. And so there's the ability that they're able to still show you their knowledge and show how much they have learned and they know that material, but maybe it's not just on a testing environment. That you have rules and policies and regulations in the classroom, but I encourage you to talk to your students and have them help you create that, because that builds that community. So if you're going to be able to talk about what are the expectations we're going to have in the class, what are the policies and kind of rules that we're going to have when we come into this classroom, have them on those first couple days of school or class to you all develop those, to develop the expectations of the classroom. And that's really, again, that building community. And that's the same things you'd be doing again with diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. You need to make sure you are reiterating everything. We're not hand-holding, but we all like reminders. And I think that sometimes we think that, well, I told you in a syllabus one time, it's there, it's your responsibility. And so it is a fine line of teaching them responsibility to know versus you're not going to be emailing them every single day saying you need to do this, this, and this, but reminding students and reiterating what your expectations are can be beneficial. One of the things that you could definitely look at for each of your classes is, what do you really want your students to learn when they leave your course? What is that authentic learning? And so what do you really need to assess to gauge, did they learn what I needed them to learn? We've talked a lot about lower stake assessments in the past year or so, that high stake assessments cause stress. We now know that stress causes students to sometimes make poor choices. So lower stake assessments might be okay for you to figure out, did our students learn what they needed to learn? Are they showing that learning in a way? So see, it might be even a completely new way to assess. And I know that Don and all of his staff are definitely there to help. And I've got a lot of resources as well, that if you need to kind of review of how can I actually assess what I need to do without maybe a 500-point exam, something like that. Giving them a voice, give your students a voice. Again, it's that building of community and building that respect within the classroom that then in turn often will lead to less results of academic integrity violations. Finding the source of motivation. And I know I'll probably hear some feedback on this, that you have 150 people in your class and you can't figure out everybody's source of motivation whatsoever, but it's helping them figure out, why is it important? Why is integrity important? Why is your class is important? We mentioned of why students sometimes cheat. It's because they don't feel that that class is necessary. They don't see the importance of it. But talk to them about why it's important. Talk to them about integrity outside the classroom. It's very easy for our colleagues over on K-State Salina campus, especially if they're in that professional pilots program. pretty easy to talk to those students in that class saying, hey, listen, you take a shortcut when you're 30,000 feet above the ground, people's lives are definitely at stake at that point. But I think every single program that you're a part of, whatever degree those students are working towards, integrity is a part of it. And so helping them realize that it's not just during their time at K-State, but why is it important for after the fact? The last slide about what you can do is, one, you can adapt teaching and assessments to a variety of learning styles. And I know this is more difficult sometimes for you as a faculty member, but allowing the students to be able to choose how they want to present the information to you, to show you that they know the material. Some students just don't write well. Yes, they need to write, and they need to be at a certain level. And so there's a fine line of I'm going to have you write a certain amount, and I'm going to support you with it. But maybe there's another project in your class that you can say, listen, I need to know that you really understand this material, and you can show me that in any way that you want. And they're going to then be committed to that. They're probably going to be a little bit more motivated to do it because they have their own input. They're able to explain, they're able to make choices for the class. Let them see examples of good, mediocre, and poor work. You're not going to be giving them examples of saying, hey, they're not going to be copying it. And they're also hopefully going to be able to say that, oh, I see now what was poor work, and I see my paper's kind of close to that. I want to do a little bit better. Giving them those examples. Having them or having a rubric, not just for a grade, but for quality, to be able to explain, again, what are your expectations for that student? And then the last thing that goes back to that idea of courage is holding them accountable. Like I said earlier, if our student realizes that they are going to possibly be found responsible or be sent to the Office of Honor and Integrity System, they're less likely to attempt something. But I also have to throw in there that holding students accountable and actually reporting something, that gives a student a due process. When students see that professors turn a blind eye, more and more students are actually going to try something in your class. However, there are definitely some professors that I know that at this point, they probably don't have anybody violate the honor pledge in their class, because they're known that they're going to report somebody if anything is found. And so it is important that you hold them accountable. And even though they might still be at that lower level of development, so there might be some reasons why, I mean, their frontal lobe's not even quite developed 100%. They're still making some poor choices, but they still have to possibly have some consequences, and we can have those educational conversations to help move them through their time of development. So for those of you who did not have my contact information, just CJ Roberts, if you have questions, or honor@ksu.edu is the office email. So I've got a few minutes. I mean, I can stay on longer as well. I know I'm almost at time, but if there's any questions, I will be happy to answer them. And I will also grab a hold of that link and put it in the chat right quick too.
So thank you, Camilla, for all of that wonderful information. We do have time for about probably one question before we close it down, but then Dr. Roberts is willing to stay on a little bit longer if anyone has anything beyond that. So is there any questions for now? All right, well, I'll give everyone a minute to marinate while I do the kind of closing, and then we'll stay on for a minute if anyone has any further questions. Thank you for attending this event. We always have post-event surveys that we would love your input on this event. When we do this every Wednesday at noon. Next Wednesday, we'll have our second teaching chat of the semester. This is a time where you can bring questions, topics, you can come to share celebrations, you can come in to commiserate, whatever you'd like to do. And if you want to just sit back and listen to the rest of us do that, that is fine too. So I promise I won't make you talk if you come next week. We'll have a lot of people who do want to talk. So thank you so much for taking your time today. If you do have some questions for Dr. Roberts, stick around.